Good morning, my friend, my 1% friend. How are you?
I thought all the years we know each other, I never thought I'd reach the day where I would be, I would be reclassified. But anyway, it's in, entirely up to you, Denise. You could call me dog, and I will still answer. Don't worry. That is a relationship. That is a relationship that we have. Spoke with this guy on my one of my stops on the way down in the morning, and he was asking me about his 1% business, and I had to explain to him that maybe you're not. Yes, we know what the 1% is when you use that term in Trinidad, but in every single country across the world, there's a 1%. Okay, and you don't have to go into great detail to figure out where they are and who they are and what have you. They're normally very, very public figures, and whether or not that is in communist China or it is in the biggest democracy in the world, India or wherever, it does exist. But I'm very glad you addressed me as my new 1% friend, because I'm just going to add that to all the different descriptions that I have heard people call me and sort of tag me and what have you. And for Trinidad, I laugh at it. I really and truly laugh at it. I mean, I grew up in Arima. I spent my first 23 years of life living in Arima. And of course, Arima in those days was Arima. All right. So, ooh, that's so far. All right. That was it. The normal refrain was, ooh, that's so far. All right. But I was called Chinese, okay, walking to school, Chinese. Then I was called white boy. Then I was called the generational term, honky. Then I was called, one of my favorites, of course, is kind of white, okay? And I look at all of that and I said, you know something? It, it never, ever felt as though I was hurt, I was insulted, I was ashamed, or anything like that. I just put that down as, again, um, generational issues. So, for instance, the first name calling was Chinese. And why? Because in Arima, there were very, very few Caucasians living in Arima. There were more Chinese people running bakery and grocery and what have you in Arima. And people, children in the various little villages and what have you, that is who they saw. Those light skinned people were Chinese people. So I put all of that down to that is how it is. So I am not going to get all tangled up with name calling and what have you. I mean, some of it is horrible. You're white, so and so, all of that kind of thing. No, that is, I don't agree with that. But I remember going through Orlando Airport about 3 or 4 years ago, and I went to a kiosk to buy a bottle of water, and there was this young black American girl running the kiosk. And when I said, "Could I have a bottle of water, please?" She said, "What accent is that?" And I said, "I'm from Trinidad." She said, "You from Trinidad? Trinidad have white people living there?" And I mean, this is Florida, okay, which is, 4 hours flight or whatever it is from Trinidad. And lo and behold, you have a population in the United States that does not even know who their neighbors are, okay? Far less for knowing that they actually have white people living on an island in the Caribbean. And so all of that I look at and I put it down. I don't want to use the word ignorance, but maybe ill-informed, not well read, and that is why people develop these sobriquets, if you want to call it.
1% in Trinidad seems to be a racial reference. When we talk about 1% who are rich, who have money, is it only the white people in this country who are rich?
If we use the term 1% to identify the wealthy, forget what hue they are, where they come from, you're going to see across the board. Really and truly, it is made up of any and everybody. You have people who have built businesses, families that have started off with a parlor, a double skirt, and have built empires in this country, okay, into all kinds of other businesses and investment through sheer hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, okay? Nobody inherited anything from their parents, even though there's also that, okay? Just hard work. I mean, look at the immigrant society that came to Trinidad regardless of what circumstances they came under. Okay? And that all started in the late 1700s, 1760s, kind of, or in and around there. But people literally arrive here with a bag on their back, and that's it. And it's through sheer guts and hard work that they were able to succeed in building quite substantial businesses. Okay, maybe still privately owned. Some of them were sold off, but the wealth is spread across class and creed and race and everything. I know one individual who has, I won't call his name obviously, who has built a substantial business, and he left school in primary school. He could not read, he could not write. Okay? And this man has built an empire worth millions of dollars. So what is that? All right. So when you're talking about 1%, yes, you can use it with the racial overtones or undertones if you want. But please, I want Trinidad and Tobago to understand the wealthy in Trinidad are not of one color or not of one race. That wealth is across the board. Okay, some might have benefited more from others for whatever reason, all the old colonial issues and what have you. But I mean, come on, we've been out of that since 1962 or worse, better than that, 1956. We really and truly started to break away from the British crown. And over those years, 70-something plus years, people have done extremely well in Trinidad. All right, and it is not one race by any means.
But Stephen, the reality is that our richest companies are people like Ansa McCall, which is the Sabga family, that's the richest one. The Hadid family is the second richest. The third one is John Rahel. Fourth is Christian Muti. And fifth is Bermuda's Bhagwan Singh families. That is interesting. Bermuda's stroke Bhagwan Singh families. And to me, Trinidad, that when we talk about 1% and we only talk about it with regard to race, we are not being open and we're not having a conversation about our country that will benefit everyone. So, what is your view about these 5 companies that are the richest companies in our country?
Let's take I think the most well known is Anthony Sabga, who since died. Okay. I know people who lived in Grand Couva who knew Mr. Sabga with his bicycle selling cloth in Grand Couva. Okay, as a young man. Okay, whether he just arrived from the home country or what, I'm not sure of that part of his history. But selling cloth on a bike, riding his bike, going from estate to estate, selling khaki and cloth for curtain and what have you. Okay, and that is how Mr. Sabga started off. Did he get a lucky break? Yes. So, for instance, with the Sabga family, when Alston's, which was a big British-owned company, Alston's was practically bankrupt. Okay, they own the high-low chain. They own a whole bunch of businesses. Alston's Limited was a massive company in Trinidad that found themselves in serious financial difficulties. And it is Tony Sabga who was able to raise the cash to buy out Alston's. And hence the reason you have Ansa McCall. Right? And Alston was McInerney, was trading companies, with manufacturing companies, huge properties all over. Okay. And okay, so it was Anthony Sabga who went and bought that company. I guess anybody else who had the money would have been able to buy it, but he saw the future in buying the company. And okay, and then therefore that family became super wealthy. By doing that. And there are many other companies, the luck of the draw. Okay, so I don't like to pigeonhole people saying, "Oh, look how much money he has." In that case, look how much money he has. Do you know what that person or that family had to go through to get that wealth? Let us understand that people. It's not because you have money that you teach people or you know. it's because of who you are, you were able to get that wealth. No. A lot of the people who have that kind of wealth in Trinidad started off as simple traders, wonder stores, all that kind of business, but worked very, very hard and was smart about it. And again, including this gentleman who's very much alive, running a substantial business, who couldn't read or write. So how he reached where he reached?
So a lot of it is because people have worked very hard. They've started from very little and they have really developed and become quite successful. So I do not see it as when we talk about 1%, that we're only talking about race in this country. And there's another reason why I don't see it as that, and that is because I think we're a mixed country and we have been mixed from the beginning. So it's not, I call you my 1% white friend. Most of our people are mixed. How do you feel about that?
I would say so. I mean, you walk down the street anyway, and you identify people who are pure with their race. Okay? And I do not know what percentage, if you're talking 1%, I do not know what percentage of this country you will consider as being pure blooded. Let's use that word. Whether it is African blood, Indian blood, European blood, whatever. Okay? Um, and I would say that it is very mixed. I mean, my own family, okay, is a mixed group, okay, and what do I think about that? Me, as far as I'm concerned, who you want a friend with, and who you want to live the rest of your life with, and what have you. That is your decision. I have no say in that. I'm not saying that that in previous generations that was the case. I think in previous generations they would have thrown you out the house. I remember there's one French Creole story I'll tell you about the grandfather standing up at the top of the steps of the great house, and his granddaughter coming to him to say that she was getting married and what have you, or his daughter, sorry, and he said two things he asked: blanc or noir, okay, white or black. And the second one was Catholic or Protestant, because of course French Creoles in Trinidad are very Catholic, okay? But his criteria for bringing in somebody into the family, the first one was blanc or noir, white or black. The second one you had to pass also was Catholic or Protestant, right? And if you fill those two, if you are right on those two counts, well, you're good to go. Okay, but that must be what, nearly 100 years ago. All right. So I do believe that Trinidad has come a long, long way. Of course, it was always they would have had race. You could imagine when the Indian population came in from India, that first boat coming in late 1845 or 1850 or whatever it is. Okay, of how is this population going to accept now yet another influx of a different race? How is that going to work? And I think, for all intents and purposes, when you look at Trinidad with the racial mix in Trinidad, I mean, I think this is a blessed country. Okay, I mean, it's not that we haven't had our problems. It's not that we still don't have some problems, and there are people who will go to their grave as a racist. Okay, and I don't care what happens. You can't change that. But that is par for the course across the world. But I think for the majority of Trinidadians and Tobagonians, race somehow is not really a criteria for, I would say, 95% of the population.
I agree with you that the majority of our population is mixed, and there are a lot of people who disagree with that. But historically, the mixture began even before slavery. It began once the country started to have people come in from different places, France, Spain, China, all kinds of places. Then you began to have mixed people. And a lot of us will not even check. Are we mixed? we've not done any of the analysis, any of the scientific analysis to say who we are and who have we come from. So I think we are mixed. And I think except for elections, we tend to respect each other. I mean, there are exceptions to that. But generally, we respect each other as mixed people. We don't even figure if you're mixed. We respect people as people. But when it comes to elections, we tend to vote, I think, versus Indian versus African. And that to me is extremely unfortunate.
When you want to extend that further, I mean, I am from a French Creole background on my mother's side, okay? On my father's side, all Coco Spanish, but anyway. So, but where did the French Creoles put their vote? Typically. And I mean, again, somebody going to pull me up on this and say, where you get that information from? I am just telling you from my own growing up in a French Creole family that the French Creoles would have supported Williams, okay, over Capildale. Now you might say, well, why is that? Because of commerce. French Creoles see or saw at that time that the Indian population were good business people, and I don't know, maybe they were a threat to the French Creoles who looked at them. If they wanted to determine who could threaten you more, it would be the Indian population. And I think for the majority of French Creoles over the years have supported the PNM. Nowadays, I think that's kind of that support now is wide open. It all depends who's making sense and who's not making sense.
Stephen,
Yeah.
that's an excellent comment you've made. Who's making sense and who's not making sense? And you're suggesting that that is how our population supports the political parties. Well, then who we supporting? Because if we're talking about who making sense and who not making sense, then the two political parties don't need to be supported at all.
Obviously, the population has grown up over the years, decades. It's no longer how it used to be, where you were stuck in one lane all the time. Okay, but there's a big part of the two biggest groups of people, which is the African group and the Indian group. Okay, they have stayed and they have batted in their crease. Okay, and regardless of what is making sense and what is not making sense, they're staying in their crease. I mean, I used to hear it when I was active in the politics. I prefer to catch hell under that particular race. If I'm going to catch hell, I want to catch hell under no other kind of race. I stayed in my crease. All right. And that is the mindset I would think of, and still there, the mindset of many people in Trinidad. And hence the reason we've ended up with a two-party state, okay, that has started in 1956, okay, and the other one started in 1962, I believe, okay, or 1960, somewhere around there. All right, and the status quo has remained. Yes, we had one or two little in between things with Robinson and what have you, but which shows that depending on what your messaging is to the population, it can shift, huh? And politicians should not for 1 minute wake up in the morning and say, I own that. See that block of votes? I own that. Those people ain't going nowhere. Well, I think with education and world knowledge and people traveling and experiencing all kinds of things, that ownership of that vote is going to slowly, we mightn't see it in our time, but I think eventually that ownership will no longer exist. It is what are you selling? Let me hear what you're selling before I go and buy it.
And as we come to an end, what is your message about the one percenters?
Well, I don't know if I appreciate you calling me out. Anyway, we wouldn't go there. I really and truly feel that all of us, have to be very, very mindful of how precious our country is. Okay? And we should not at any time be lording it over anybody. Not because you have money, you could lord it over people. Okay? Everybody here started with a suitcase on their back, for the majority of us. Okay? And therefore, not because you were successful or one other part of the population was not that successful that we should be lording it over anybody. All of us should be fighting for one thing, which is that little flag in the back of me there. Okay? And that is what we should be standing for, not on a race issue. I know that's easy to say. Huh?
Yes, but that is an excellent message that we look at the flag in the back of my friend, my 1% friend, and we say to ourselves, let's do the best for our country. Speak about TNT so that things can improve. Thank you very much for being here today, Stephen.
Thank you, Denise.